He just killed the other woman. The heat is flowing through his veins. His breath is heavy, and droplets of dark red blood are all over his hand. He hears a sound. Footsteps? What is that? His mind detonates into a billion worst-case scenarios. She seized him, and now they both freeze. Her fingers twitch to scream. Time dilates as if he's in a black hole. End her or lose everything. Go! Prior to the incident, a man by the name of Rodion Raskolnikov writes an article titled On Crime, in which he divides humanity into two groups, the ordinary and the extraordinary. In this article, Raskolnikov argues that the world is made up of those who must follow the rules, the ordinary ones, and those who are justified in breaking them, the extraordinary ones. The latter are far fewer in number compared to the rest of humanity, but their genius, innovation, and idiosyncrasy creates a much larger impact on the world by pushing humanity to new levels. Living in absolute poverty, Raskolnikov has run out of funds to continue his studies in law school. Letters from his hometown only add to his stress when he realizes how much his mother and sister have sacrificed for his success. After selling his last valuable possession to a greedy pawnbroker, Raskolnikov reaches a point of desperation and begins developing a plan to murder and rob her, having came to see himself as an extraordinary individual whose actions are justified for greater good. He planned every move and imagined every outcome before it happened. With this in mind, he walked to the house of the pawnbroker and killed her with an axe. Her sister, an unexpected witness, was killed as well. Blood in his hands, breath stuck in his throat. The weight of what he had done is now crushing his spine. He thought the world was predictable, but ambition has a way of breaking men who confuse thought with action. After the murder, the supposedly extraordinary Raskolnikov fled back to his apartment and collapsed into a deep sleep. He thought he was meant for something greater than himself. However, what transpired was nothing but guilt and a mental collapse. The weight of carrying out this act on his shoulders revealed to him that this was far more than what he was originally prepared for. The man eventually breaks down and confesses about his murder of the pawnbroker's death and her sister. During his confession, Raskolnikov states that he wanted to be like Napoleon Bonaparte, and his killing of the pawnbroker was his way of doing so, as he thought her murder was a justified overruling of the law for a greater good, and by doing so, Raskolnikov has discovered that he's nothing but an ordinary man. Have you ever wondered why is it that you know what you need to do but just can't seem to do it? Why do you hope, dream and pray for things but never seem to obtain or achieve them? Why do you start making positive progress towards your dreams and goals just to self-sabotage later? And why are we always fighting ourselves? Why does the good habits feels like they are upstream and not easy? Why is there so much friction? We talked about the story of Raskolnikov and how after committing a murder to prove his extraordinary, he collapsed under guilt, realizing that he's actually nothing but a normal man. His story shows us how ambition without self-understanding leads to destruction. I myself suffered with this a lot, you know. I'm a binger. When I relapse hard, binging the whole damn thing, you know. And sometimes it feels like I can never seem to kick off my addictions no matter what I try. So I heard about this guy named Carl Jung. The primary motive of his career was to understand the nature of the human psyche and then develop theories and methods to help in the integrations of all of its components. And in 1928, Jung released a piece of work titled 2 Essays on Analytical Psychology. I tried reading his books before, but I wasn't in the right state of mind to even sit down and read, let alone understand or apply that shit. Not only that, but even if I were to force myself to sit down and read it, then I wouldn't understand a thing because this guy writes like a gibberish philosopher acting all smart and shit. Fuck you, Carl Jung. Fuck you. And whenever I would go on YouTube in hopes of finding something digestible or useful, there will only be these shitty videos filled with AI-generated slop, AI pictures with AI voiceovers, reading an AI-generated text with an AI-generated bio down below. Hello? The fuck is this? Finding an actual content creator who genuinely cares about this feels genuinely impossible nowadays, you know? And so in the last month or so, I've set my mind to actually read the book, understand it, apply it, and turn it into a simple, coherent framework that you can start using today. Yo, what's good in the hood, my boys? I'm Xenex, and if you're not familiar with me, we don't do any of the standard self-help bullshit in here. We study humanity's sharpest minds and turn their ideas into systems that align with our goals and turn our dreams into motherfucking gold. Let's get it, boys. Welcome to the team, yeah? So I know that this is probably not your first time hearing about Carl Jung, but I am ready to bet everything on the fact that you've never ever seen anything like this playlist before. Pay attention, it will seriously change your fucking life for the better. So this playlist is split into two different parts. The first half will be discussing the structure and anatomy of the human mind, and in the second half we will be discussing the interactions between those structures and what you can do about them today to start seeing visible progress. If it feels like your results are not tangible, despite putting in genuine effort, then your problem isn't knowing, your problem isn't doing. The problem is consistently doing over months, if not years. Can you do that? If not, then there's a reason for that. In the early 1880s, Austrian physician Joseph Breuer made some crazy-ass discoveries in neurophysiology. He had this one patient who couldn't move her arm, completely paralyzed, But what's insane is that there was nothing physically wrong with her arm. There was no damage, there was no broken tissues, and her physical body was completely fine. Another patient reported that she couldn't hear, yet she could sing perfectly in tune. At one point, her doctor even changed the keys of the piano mid-song, and without realizing it, she adjusted her voice to match that change. She heard, yet at the same time didn't hear. One man went blind, but only partially. He could see everything except for people's heads. Imagine looking at someone and only seeing a body. He saw, yet at the same time didn't see. So what was actually broken there? It wasn't the body, it wasn't the senses or organs, but their awareness. Their mind literally blocked the image and didn't allow it to reach consciousness. Let that sink in for a second. Let that sink in, motherfucker. If this doesn't make your jaw drop, I don't know what will. Because their eyes literally worked, their ears worked, and their body worked. But their mind blocked reality. This is a legit condition, you can look it up. It's called hysteria, whereby the conditions, such as blindness, for example, lacks biological evidence, but with the presence of biological symptoms. Thus, it is believed that the physical symptoms related to hysteria are caused by psychological issues and stress. And after working with these patients, it led him to the development of the talking cure, because the doctors learned to cure these seemingly physical illnesses just by talking with the patients and solving their mental problems. In other words, you do not experience reality as it is. You experience what your mind allows you to perceive. And if your mind can literally make someone blind, deaf, or paralyzed without any physical damage, what do you think it's doing to your discipline, your focus, and your ability to execute? This is why it's so tricky to figure out this shit, because the problem was never out there in the physical world, but it's internal in the invisible mental realm. And if you're trying to operate at a high level without understanding how your mind works, it's like driving a fucking car at full speed on the highway without ever learning to drive. You didn't even take driving lessons. What are you doing? Of course you're gonna crash. Of course you're gonna fall off and relapse and binge and all of this fucked up shit. Of course. You were never prepared for this shit. No one told you how to deal with it. And now that you understand the problem isn't physical but mental, let's start dissecting the mind and breaking it down, piece by piece, because it can be very tricky, unlike the brain. You know how with the brain it's very easy to do that. You can use the MRI machine and point out a finger to this part saying, okay, well, this section does that. This cortex does that, It's easy because the brain is physical and you can directly observe the cause and effect, right? But with the mind, it's a whole other game because it's intangible. And this is where we bring in something that no one's talking about, which is Carl Jung's map of the psyche. Not the dumbed down Instagram quote cute version, but the real deal. Because like I said earlier, some people tried making videos about this shit, and honestly, they're all fucking horrible. They're all dog piss. You will uncover your masks, your real self, and the hidden forces controlling you. Why do you act against your goals, and how these different parts are running the show on autopilot. So let's reveal that pilot in this video. So the psyche has different layers. Some are deeper than others, and by deeper I mean layers that you are not aware of. So let's start with the surface level ones and then go deeper from there. The first layer, which is the most conscious that everyone knows about, is the persona. This is basically the mask, and it's very necessary, you know. You wear it whether you admit it or not. A lot of people will call this cringe. Oh yeah, he thinks he's a manipulative character. That's not what I'm saying, bro. Chill out. The way you speak to your parents is different from how you speak with your boys, is different from how you speak with a woman that you have a crush on, or when you're completely alone. You see that? Those are different versions of you, different masks, you know, adapted to different environments. And no, this doesn't make you fake or a fraud. It's actually just how humans are in general. Society, including yourself, expect people to play their roles. So for example, when you go to the bar, right, you expect the bartender to be welcoming and give you a beer. You don't expect him to give you orders and tell you what to do, or open up about his life story whilst giving you a hug without doing his job. That's not the role he's supposed to be playing in that situation, right? And the same thing goes to everyone and everybody. The persona is the interface between you and the world. It's the character that you've learned to play to be able to survive and be accepted within society. And here, most guys get this twisted because they think they are the mask. They over-identify with it, and when that mask starts cracking under the slightest pressure, so does their sense of self. So for now, I want you to understand this clearly, right? The persona is nothing but a tool. It is not you and it is not your identity. It's just a mask that you show to people, right? Depending on the situation you're in. Conscious ego. Now, behind every mask of everyday life, there is a layer of conscious awareness. And awareness isn't necessarily the inner voice in your mind. It's the thing that observes that voice. That's conscious ego. And just a quick disclaimer here, ego in this context and throughout this series of videos, it's not arrogance. I'm not talking about someone being arrogant. I'm talking about consciousness and awareness, right? And consciousness can be understood as a combination of awareness plus decision making plus a sense of self, okay? So the ego often, a lot of the times, it feels like it encompasses everything we are. It feels like this is me. It's who I am, you know, the whole picture. But in reality, it's just one component of this larger system, which is the human mind. It only feels like everything because it's the only part of you that's actually conscious. But it's not everything. It's just one part, you know. And it's within the ego that rational thinking and deliberate decision making take place. Yet even here, the process is more limited than it seems, you know. Now, to understand this further, let's look at how the ego forms and what it can and cannot do. When you are born, nothing is under your control and it's just pure luck. There is no decision making and your level of awareness is very, very peak when you are a child. You have no say on what will happen over the next 5 to 10 years. You don't choose which country you're born in. You don't choose your family. You don't choose how your teachers and peers will respond to you when you're a child. In this stage, you're just passively reacting to the world rather than imposing your conscious will on it. These are the initial experiences you live. And those initial experiences starts to create desires and pains. Slowly but surely, you start wanting things and avoiding others. And these initial tendencies goes to your unconscious. So unconscious tendencies are actually formed before conscious decision making. For now, don't worry about what the unconscious is or what is it made of or what does it mean. Don't worry about that. We're going to get to that in a bit. The important idea here that I want you to understand is that you do not consciously decide what your default settings are. You don't choose your default desires or pains. You don't choose the starting point because they were formed in experiences that you didn't consciously choose. However, later on in life, let's say around late teens to early 20s, consciousness is developed to a level where you can think about thinking. You start questioning your identity. You start observing your beliefs and you want to seek to understand yourself better. So here at this stage, rational thinking and awareness and decision making are developed enough to be used for creation of new experiences despite previous desires or tendencies. I want to highlight a very important distinction here between desires and decisions. You do not choose what you want. Those are formed in initial experiences. You only choose what you will do about them. and you can do something whether desire is there or not, aka willpower/discipline, thus forming a new experience. And over time, those experiences can give rise to new desires or pains which previously didn't exist. Basically, when the ego forms and it's conscious enough to understand this concept, it's game over, because this creates a rock paper scissors dynamic. Experiences form desires, desires influence decisions, and decisions create experiences. But the only part that is aware of this whole dynamic is consciousness. Thus, it's the most powerful, because you can act on something even if you don't want it, as long as you impose enough will on it, okay? And with enough experiences, you now condition a new desire to arise. So in essence, you do not control what you want, but you control what you do about it, creating a new experience. And experiences will eventually shape what you want. The split brain experiments. Now, the next layer is the unconscious mind, but to be able to understand it properly, it helps to briefly step away from psychology for a bit and look at neuroscience. So, in neuroscience, the brain is often described in terms of two hemispheres. The left is typically dominant, analytical, and logical, and this is the part that is responsible for language, whilst the right hemisphere is more emotional, intuitive, symbolic, and nonverbal, you could say. Now, these hemispheres also work contralaterally, meaning that the left hemisphere controls the right side of the body and the right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. Normally, they communicate with no problems through a structure called the corpus callosum, which acts like a bridge between these two, Now, that's how it is for most people, but not for this guy. This motherfucker is built different, and understanding his story will give you some valuable insights on how your mind is actually structured, In some medical conditions, such as people with severe epilepsy, this bridge is surgically cut in a procedure known as corpus callosotomy. Basically, they isolate the two halves of the brain where they can't communicate with each other anymore. And this guy have been through that very surgery. And after that surgery, scientists wanted to study him to better understand how the brain works, and it revealed something insane about the nature of consciousness. So at first, this man is shown a word on the right side of the screen, which sends the information to the left hemisphere, if you remember. When they asked him what he saw, he easily responded with phone, because the left hemisphere is the part of the brain that is responsible for processing language, like we said. But when the same word is shown to the left visual field, sending it to the right hemisphere, something insane fucking happens.
But when a word is flashed to his right brain...
Didn't see that.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you...
But now watch what happens.
To draw that with your left hand.
You're going to be lost.
Why don't you try drawing another picture of it over here, if that'll help you.
Phone.
Okay.
It's almost as though somebody has given him a secret communication.
That's fucking insane. The nigga really said he saw nothing, yet his left arm draws a fucking phone. What? What are you talking about? The right hemisphere clearly perceived the object, but it couldn't verbalize it because language is housed in the left brain. There is a neuroscientist named Michael Gazzaniga, and he conducted extensive research on these people who have been through the split brain procedure, He even wrote a full book about it, demonstrating even more dramatic cases. The right hemisphere has perceived the stimulus and triggered a whole ass response, but the conscious verbal quote-unquote self in the left hemisphere had no awareness of what actually happened. In some extreme cases, this division can become almost unreal, where one hand buttons a shirt and then the other hand just unbuttons it, Or one hand reaches for an object whilst the other one pushes it away. So why does it feel like a hand acting with its own will? because it literally is. These findings basically suggest that we don't have a single unified quote-unquote I that is fully in control of everything. Instead, the mind is made of multiple semi-independent systems, many of which operate outside of conscious awareness. You're not even aware of them. You don't even know they exist. This is why self-control is so fucking hard and tricky, because you don't even perceive the damn thing. Just as you can't consciously will your heart to randomly stop beating or consciously directing your digestion, these mental processes constantly shape your perception, your decisions and action without your knowledge. And this is what I wanted to show you using neuroscience, okay? Your conscious awareness is only a small part of what's actually going on inside you. So with that in mind, we can now return to psychology and better understand what we mean by the unconscious mind. What even is that, Now, let's go one layer deeper below conscious awareness. The unconscious mind has three main components. And the first one is buried memories. These are emotional experiences from your past, These are moments that shaped you, marked you, and then got pushed away outside of awareness, But don't mistake buried for gone. They're not gone. There is a difference there because they are active right here, right now. And chances are, if this video is clicking with you, it's probably because a buried memory or a buried experience from the past is enjoying this stimulus, They silently assign meaning to your current experiences. The way you interpret rejection, success, or pressure, it's all automatically filtered through these past imprints from your old memories. The shadow. The second component of the unconscious is what Jung called the shadow. And in the self-improvement space, this idea is a little bit discussed, but no one actually fucking understands it or explains it properly. It's not just your dark side. It's not anger, lust, or greed. That's just a fraction of what it could be. It could be any of those, but not always, The shadow is basically everything that you reject about yourself. Anything that you judge, suppress, or deny gets pushed into the shadows. And the worst part here is that you can reject things that are totally neutral or even powerful for you. You can reject confidence. You can reject dominance, consistency, emotional expression. If at some point in your life you decided that this is not me, this thing is not me, and I don't like that, it gets exiled instantly to the unconscious. Basically, whatever you consciously demonize, you will disconnect from it. And what you consciously disconnect from doesn't fucking disappear. It operates unconsciously until it takes control of your body sooner or later, whether you like it or not. So now you've got parts of you full of energy acting in the dark without your direction. That's why your behavior feels misaligned with what you value. We will talk about integration later on in future episodes, right? For now, just understand this. What you refuse to face and what you hate will control you from behind sooner or later. Complexes/characters. The third components are what Jung calls complexes, or as I like to call them, characters. I find that as a easier, more simpler name instead of complexes. Imagine these like sub-personalities formed through your life experiences. Each one has its own needs, its own fears and desires, and then they are not random at all. They were built, often in childhood, as adaptations to your environment. You might have a disciplined, driven character, and sitting right next to it, a self-sabotaging one that seeks comfort and escape. Both of them are you. Both of them are real, and both are competing for control over the body and behaviors. And most men aren't aware of this shit at all, because again, they've always been told to act like a rock, bro, be stoic, and when they inevitably fall off, which is going to happen for everybody, they think they're weak. But it's not that. It's not about weakness or strength or none of that shit, bro. And the only fucking answer they get in this shitty space is, oh, come on, look in, mate. Come on. Holy shit. Yo, this shit drives me insane. Now, to be honest, I kind of discovered this concept by myself through deep inner work before I ever read about Carl Jung. At one point, I seriously started to believe that something was wrong with me. I thought I was just a schizo-mentally ill retard. But the more I studied psychology and neuroscience, the clearer it actually became that this is totally normal. It's even universal. Maybe I have it to a more intense degree than other people, but it doesn't change the fact that everyone has this shit. Everyone has a sense of inner family inside of them. The only difference is your level of awareness about this inner family and the level of their intensity, like how loud or strong are they. That's it. And your job isn't to eliminate these characters, it's to understand them, why they exist, and then lead them properly. You're kind of like their leader. That's the role of the ego. Love and power, instincts. Now, think of these two as the main desires the human mind is trying to fulfill. So after identifying these different components of the psyche, this part is more like what those components are trying to achieve in the first place. Why do they exist? So the first desire was proposed by Sigmund Freud, and Freud transformed all of psychology because before him, the standard assumption was that mental disorders mainly came from traumatic experiences or physical illnesses. But he has shown that some people will have shocking events and still be fine, and that mental disorders are actually rooted more in unconscious emotional conflicts, especially in love and desire. So the desire for love can be viewed as a drive for connection, sex, or acceptance. These are the things that we seek in relationships, family, and our social environments. If those desires are repressed or ignored, then they will lead to mental problems. The second desire is the desire for power, which was proposed by Nietzsche, in his Will to Power, and then later on was developed into a psychological theory by a psychologist named Alfred Adler. This one is kind of the opposite, where the main drive isn't the desire for love, but for power, for control, dominance, and self-preservation, where the ego strives for recognition and influence, asserting itself in both personal and social contexts. So Freud saw love and sexuality as the main driving forces, with the ego serving them. But Adler saw the ego and its power as primary, with love serving the ego to get what it wants. Now, Carl Jung doesn't really pick a side here. Instead, he thinks that Freud and other theories are not opposite of each other's. They are just two sides of the same coin. Both theories explain real aspects about the human psyche. Freud focuses on people who are faced with relationship problems and are externally focused, whilst Adler focuses on people who are fueled by power, superiority, and self-protection and are more internally focused. And so what Carl Jung did, he went on to develop his own theory of opposite, where he proposes that a human isn't just a simple this or that, but rather a mixture of both. And each person leans more towards one side in their conscious attitude, whilst the other side remains hidden in the unconscious. And problems arise when the quote-unquote weaker, neglected side gets activated because the person didn't learn to pay attention to it consciously and deal with it, And so it gains a kind of like a life of its own, you could say. The person then enters a very sensitive and emotional state, and this causes conflict, misunderstanding, and all sorts of problems within the person, within the relationship, and within society as a whole, Now, to better understand this process, let me give you an actual example from my personal life. The NoFap movement, right? Everyone heard about this shit in the self-help, self-improvement space. The core idea of NoFap is to reject lust and view it as something weak or shameful, right? Shame this shit. Shame the hell out of people who fap. That's literally the entire movement. So the goal is to overcome these desires, such as lust, and in doing so, become more powerful, more disciplined, more in control. And now on the surface, this might seem like a solid approach, but it misses such a crucial point, man. You can't truly eliminate desire. You can only redirect it. I fell victim to this mindset myself, especially because I naturally gravitate towards the power instinct. I bought into the philosophy of stoicism, convincing myself that conquering lust would make you a stronger, more successful person. I despised porn with every ounce of my being, viewing it as a weakness. But what I failed to recognize at the time is that by repressing my natural instinct, I was actually feeding them and making them even stronger. I tried to suppress my desires so violently that it only grew stronger, hiding beneath the surface, waiting for a crack to appear. Well, guess what, motherfucker? Eventually, that crack did fucking appear. And I found myself diving deep into the darkest, most destructive corners of the internet, which was gooning Discord servers. Now, unlike today, where gooning is just a silly joke, haha, it's funny. Back then, in 2023, this shit was an actual niche cult that positively reinforces addicts and crippling addictions, and no one knew about it back then. It wasn't known at all. It was very niche, And so I became an addicted, all-consuming, obsessed weirdo. I became addicted to the point where I once spent 12 hours in one gooning session. Yes, you heard that right. You heard that correctly. 12 fucking hours. I'm not even exaggerating. Like, that's not even an exaggeration. It was so bad to the point where it would literally make me fucking cry, man. And the worst part is that I didn't even realize that I got to that point because I was feeding this lust. I was feeding this power through NoFap itself. I didn't even know that. That's why lust had such a grip over me, because I was leaning so hard towards the power instinct, neglecting the love instinct. And that's why it had such a grip over me, and it took me years to be able to undo all that damage. This is what happens when you try to repress or reject your instinctual drives. They don't go away. This is the big lesson behind Jung's psychology. What you refuse to face does not go away. They only find new ways to manifest, often with much greater intensity than before. And so to be able to develop and grow as a person, you gotta acknowledge your weaker instinct and develop it rather than ignoring it and letting it grow in the background. Because eventually you will have to face it sooner or later. Trust me, I tried to skip this shit and I got grilled, bro. I got fucking cooked. I got burnt alive. So don't go and make that same mistake like I did, okay? So right now, I want you to ask yourself, which desire do you think you're trying to fulfill? Is it love or power? And which one are you ignoring? Don't worry about integration just yet or controlling these desires. We're going to get to that later. Just for now, just focus on identifying your main desire, your main instinct, okay? And how did it happen throughout your life? By the way, before you click off, right? If you are the type of guy who struggles to follow through on your projects and you can't seem to make significant, visible, tangible progress to your goals, then there is a video in the description below that explains how to leverage psychology for behavior control. Check it out if you're interested in more than just the free stuff here on YouTube. It's designed to sell you something, I'm not going to pretend like it's not. You don't got to do it or anything. To be fair, I don't really care if you do it or not. But just feel free to check it out if you have behavior and self-control problems, all right? So here's what we've covered in this video. We talked about the story of Raskolnikov and how after committing a murder to prove he's extraordinary, he collapsed under guilt, realizing that he's actually nothing but a normal man. His story shows us how ambition without self-understanding leads to destruction. Then we connected this to Jungian psychology and how your mind, not reality, your mind controls behavior, perception, and self-sabotage. And if you don't master it, you will forever remain inconsistent, conflicted, and stuck. I gave you the model, which shows how the psyche is layered. We talked about the persona, which is the social mask. We talked about the ego, which is conscious awareness. And we explained the 3 layers of the unconscious mind. The 3 forces include buried memories, the shadow, which are rejected traits, and a competing inner characters inside of you. Now, these unconscious forces are driven by either the love or the power instinct, and imbalance or repression of either instinct will create inner conflict and self-sabotage. Okay, in the next episode, we will go beyond structure and we will talk about the interactions between these different structures. You will see how your mask, your ego, and shadow clash against each other, creating different feedback loops, creating, identity traps and destructive behavior. I will also teach you how to actually break this cycle once and for all. And I'm going to reveal how to communicate with your unconscious to finally take control. So the next episode is a big one. Make sure you stay tuned and sub if you're not, all right? Like and sub, do all that shit. It takes a second. I don't want to be desperate, but it really does help. Like, if you like the video, I literally get 10 views. It took me hundreds of hours to make this video, and if you like the video, I get 10 views, and if one of those guys like the video, I get another 10 views. So that's the best way to help me, because it grows exponentially from there, and you can trigger this snowball effect for me. Thank you so much. And I'm really happy for you to be here, because this is genuinely going to save you so much time and prevent a lot of mistakes that I had to go through. Very well done, bro. Very good shit you're doing here. So see you in the next one.